This is Business Edge on News Central. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Our headline story: Zambia's mines, issues and solutions. Africa is a continent blessed with many natural resources. Unfortunately, many African countries still struggle to fund infrastructure, their needs and their economies. Zambia has a wide range of natural resources, including copper, cobalt, silver, uranium, lead, coal, zinc, gold, and even emerald, but recently defaulted on its Eurobond repayment. Can Zambia's mining industry still find a way into the light? That is our focus today. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Now, Zambia has a long history of mining, predominantly in copper and cobalt, which is concentrated in an area known as Copper Belt Province, renowned for high-grade deposits. Zambia also hosts small-scale gold, coal, and zinc deposits as well. Now, recently, a Chinese company exploring for diamonds announced the discovery of high-grade diamonds, which are equivalent to those found in South Africa. During the 2018 to 2019 budget breakdown, the finance minister at the time announced an increase in taxes, particularly for the mining sector. The miners revolted. The back and forth tussle led to the minister being sacked and replaced. Now, President Edgar Lungu's announcement in December that Africa's second biggest copper producer wanted to take significant stakes in unspecified mines led to fears of a fresh wave of nationalization. And it did happen, with Zambia taking over Glencore and Vedanta's local operations in the past 2 years. However, according to the new finance minister, Zambia isn't looking to take over more mining companies, nor is the government planning to nationalize the industry. The minister further explained that in some quarters, the president's statement was misunderstood to mean that Zambia is contemplating taking over other mining firms by force or nationalizing mining companies. We are not in that business at all. He also added that Zambia will also get a better understanding of mining taxation and royalties from running operations like those previously owned by Glencore. Now, joining me on Business Edge is Chibamba Kanyama. He's an economist and former IMF Communications Advisor. Good morning and welcome to Business Edge, Chibamba. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. It's now afternoon here in Zambia.
All right. So having you right there on location makes this a much more vital conversation. So in the past, we've seen from various governments, both in Africa and outside, that governments nationalizing or taking over certain assets like mines is actually bad in the long run and tends to scare away potential investors. But Zambia took over 2 mines in the past few years. So let's talk about the idea behind taking over the mine from Glencore and Vedanta. What was the government thinking?
Well, I think there are 2 motivations for what I would call takeover. The first motivation is to protect jobs. That's the major one. And it's much more pronounced with the latest one, with Mopani. Because Mopani had planned to shut down a few shafts, a few mines, because the operational costs were just too high compared to the value they were getting from sales of copper. So they had threatened and given an indication they were going to close some of the key shafts. And that would have implied loss of about 13,000 to 16,000 jobs. Now, as you indicated in the introduction, Copper Belt is about mining, and it is the political hotspot for the country. Most of the leaders come from there because of the impact of the mining industry to the whole country. So protecting jobs has both a political win as well as an economic win for the actual individual. So that's number one. The second one is ongoing suspicion, the suspicion by the government that the mining companies are not adhering fully to development agreements. And these agreements have to do with a portion of remittances to government the suspicion is that there's creative accounting by most of these mining companies and cheating on what they should be paying to government. So the taking over of KCM, which is Vendetta, was primarily on account of what the government suspects to be underhand methods employed by the owner.
Okay, so a number of issues there. So the taxation, possibly double booking, faulty, would we say faulty or deliberately faulty accounting, which is then denying Zambia of its dutiful and rightful revenue from this. But we all know that government getting into business is actually bad for business. And hearing from the president and the minister of the finance as well, saying that they want to learn about taxation, want to learn about the process from Glencore. Do you think Zambia can learn, and do you think that Zambia as a government can make good on this, or will they eventually, again, hand them back over or sell them to someone else? Because we've seen it. Government does not need to be in the business of government, or rather in the business of business.
The Minister of Finance is a little careful in this matter. Remember that the International Monetary Fund starts negotiations with Zambia today. In the next 3-4 hours, they will be commencing discussions for a possible program for Zambia, a bailout program for Zambia. And the IMF would not like the resurgence, the emergence of parastatals or state-owned enterprises because they consume government resources. They hardly declare profits. They are just good for the moral factor most times, but not the actual profits declared to government. Now, it's important for people to understand that Zambia already has a framework of getting revenue from the mining companies. Number one, we're getting revenues through royalties. Right now, they are flexible. The royalties in the past 3 years have been flexible. So that's very critical because they are according to the price of copper between 5.5% to 10%, and as well as actual tax that mining companies pay as you earn for employees as well as corporate taxes. So government gets dividend as well through the ZCCM investment holding. So there's an investment holding that oversees government interest in all the mining companies. They don't do the mining, but what happens now is that ZCCM will be involved in actual ownership of Mopani. That's an issue that everybody's concerned about.
All right, so we'll follow that because, again, given the fact that there are also corruption allegations as well, with those who are in governments making it possibly easy for the mining companies to not do the right things, there definitely would be concern. So let's talk about some of the taxation and the fiscal regimes around the mining sector. Professor Oliver Sasa of Premier Consult and Shibo Nalishibo of the Zambia Institute for Policy Analysis and Research says Zambia has the highest tax burden by a very comfortable margin of all comparable mining countries, and that under the new fiscal regime for the new mining sector, the effective tax rates, which is about the average rate at which pre-tax profits are taxed, would vary between 86.3% and 105%, depending on the copper price. Do you agree with this assessment first? And then second, this burden that the country is carrying, where does it come from? How can it be addressed so that it is not as high as it is?
There are three things that govern the mining sector right now with regard to taxation. The first one has to do with the constant changes in the tax policy. The mining companies have not actually complained so much about high taxes as they have complained about two things, VAT, which I'll talk about shortly, as well as frequent changes in the tax policy. You know, mining is a long-term investment, and most of these mines in Zambia, of course, they're all internationally owned, and mobilization of capital is through the stock markets, debt equity, as well as actual, debt itself, equity capital rather, as well as debt. Now, equity capital, they mobilize it through the Toronto Stock Exchange or Australia. Now, they have to do a prospectus assuring the investors that the projected return on investment is 10 to 15 years. assuming all things remain equal. Unfortunately, tax has always been fluctuating and has impacted on the return on capital for investors. And this has been the primary concern of all the mining companies in Zambia, that we are changing policies on tax just too often. Let tax rates remain the same for at least 10 to 15 years to guide investment. Number two, the big problem has been on VAT refunds, value-added tax. I think the international media has been following this event frequently, that government was not refunding the mines for what was due to them. The past 2 years, the government has done its best to liquidate the huge chunk of VAT. It is still owing them somehow, and some of it still requires reconciliation. However, the mining companies still believe they are owed substantial amounts of money, estimates about $200 million US. The figure keeps changing, but that's how much the mining companies are owed. But with regard to the taxes, whether they are high or not, government is seeking proper compensation. It believes, like I said earlier on, that the mining companies are not fully declaring the income, that they are, there is what we call this pricing, which the manipulative kind of pricing, I'll call it, transfer, they call it transfer pricing, where a parent company buys copper from Zambia at a very low price. They buy copper at a very low price from Zambia, from their own small subsidiary company. And they only sell the copper at a very high price so that they suppress the income. And it is that income on which government is expecting profits. So most of them would declare losses when they have actually made profits. To compensate for cheating, or manipulative creative accounting, government has gone the way of reasonably higher taxes for the mining industry.
Okay, so you raised two interesting points that I want us to follow up on when we come back. The policy flip-flop affecting the tax regime. What is responsible for so many changes in the tax regime in the mining sector? Then this issue of pricing. How can Zambia have much more control of the pricing of such precious metals that are also part of where the company, or rather the country, makes its revenue? Chibamba, please hold on. We will be back after this quick break. You are still watching Business Edge. Stay with us. Still with me on Business Edge is Chibamba Kanyama, and we're talking about Zambia's mines, the issues and the solutions. Now, Chibamba, before we went for a break, you talked about the flip-flopping of the policy around the tax regimes for mining sector in Zambia. Let's look at that. What's responsible for this continuous flip-flop? Because I do understand where the mining companies are coming from. Let us know what we're meant to pay. Let us know what we're facing for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Let it be a span of time, rather than we wake up one morning and something has changed again. So what is government saying is responsible for this change that seems to be happening much more often than many would expect?
There are many reasons for that. The first thing you should understand that copper is a political issue in Zambia. It's a political issue. It has so many stakeholders, both civil society organizations and political players. Now, if there's any point where there is a lot of pressure, a lot of significant pressure in terms of the impact of copper mining, it's coming from civil society organizations. The Zambian public, people believe strongly that we are not getting the best payback for owning this resource. They feel the real winner are the investors. The Zambians are not gaining anything apart from the dividend income that comes through ZCCMIH. There's no mine that is listed in Zambia. They are all listed abroad. And for this reason, sentiment around mining is so strong that whichever government takes over power, they have to meet this political pressure, the expectations of the Zambians, including civil society. And that contributes to Zambian government changing the rate of tax
Hello, Chibamba.
Yeah, hello.
Okay, please continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, government doesn't have capacity, maybe until now, but the past many years, government has not had the forensic capacity to audit mining companies. So because of this lack of capacity, the information that government normally receives about what is coming from the mining companies is very, it lacks transparency. It doesn't guide policy. And so government resorts to speculative, I'll call it speculative tax regimes. And the third factor is about the pricing of copper. Copper prices change often. Today they are high, they are trading at $8,000 per metric ton. Tomorrow they are trading at $3,000 per metric ton. So because of the fluctuations, one moment mining companies feel they are making huge money, and then they are not making money. In fact, there was a time about 10 years ago when government introduced windfall taxes. Windfall taxes that beyond a certain price of copper, you have met the threshold you have triggered a higher tax revenue. But that was protested and the mining companies complained. So we have been going back and forth mainly because of lack of proper information about what is pertaining to the mining industry with regard to production costs as well as the actual profits that they are making.
Okay, that makes sense. So then on the other side of that, you've mentioned pricing again. And while we know Zambia is not the only copper producer around the continent, it's not the only copper producer in the world, but it does not have enough, I'm looking for the word, enough influence, there we go, enough influence on the price of copper on the international market. How can this change? We've seen what Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire have done in terms of cocoa and farm gates or cocoa gates as it may be. So how can Zambia step up and find out that it can have a bit more influence on the price of a resource that is being mined from inside its borders? Is there any way for that to happen?
It is possible, but very difficult in an industry where, number one, we have got so many interested players. There are a lot of players. So we have got hedge funds, you've got the transfer pricing itself, where the parent company has an interest to the subsidiary company, so they want to manipulate the price to benefit themselves. And then we have got very limited demand. It's not like a consumable. These consumable products that have to do with retail producers, retail consumers, it's very easy to be a price giver and not a price taker. But copper has very limited market, and at the moment it's basically China. China is a major consumer. So they manipulate the demand and supply. It's really about demand and supply. And they are able to play around demand. No, the consumer, the buyer, manipulates and works on demand, that we don't need your copper. But remember, countries like Zambia, they between 70 and 85% of its foreign exchange revenue is from copper. And the moment you make a decision that will not sell our copper until, like the oil companies do, we are dead. No foreign exchange earnings for us. And the other factor that can help is leadership within the industry. We've got many players like Chile, DRC, Zambia, the US, and so forth. But the CPEC has been there for many years. I don't remember when CPEC, unlike OPEC for oil companies, they meet often, they decide how to hold the commodity. They can hold the commodity to suppress supply so that they can ignite demand. But I don't remember when there was a meeting of CPEC for copper producing countries. I don't know when they last met. So they have given themselves at the mercy of the buyer. The buyer is so well organized, and I always say it is a rigged market in the sense that the buyer has manipulated the market for this metal.
Okay. We have to wrap up, but there's a lot in what you have said in terms of the main demander, the main markets for copper, how much dependency Zambia has on copper as well, on its copper proceeds and revenues. But let's quickly talk about diamonds, because now it's been reported that some Chinese miners have found diamonds in Zambia. How is this going to change things? Is this going to change things at all? What's the potential effect of diamond mining for Zambia?
Apparently, diamond mining isn't that very significant as compared to the gold mining. Gold mining is a new thing for us now. Government has shown a lot of interest. It's trying to organize this sector since last year. So it has set up its own company that will be buying off gold from the private sector players, including the mining companies. You know, these mining companies have for a long time been mining copper, and there are some residues of gold, but they haven't been declaring gold.
Wow.
And have actually been making more money from gold than from copper, but they haven't been declaring. But since 3 years ago, government has put up some scanning equipment now at the border that you cannot cheat. So mining companies have to fully declare gold. Now, the gold mining is just starting. For the first time in the history of Zambia, I think we have the Reserve Bank, the Bank of Zambia, stocking gold bought from the market, from the Zambian market.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to have to pick up this conversation. I apologize, Chibamba. We're going to have to pick up this conversation because we haven't even touched the conversation on Zambia's default of the Euro bond repayment. And I think that also has to be added in the context of what's happening with the mines and then what the progression is going to be. So there are a lot of government actions right now trying to make sure that the revenue that is duly meant to go to Zambia actually goes to Zambia and people are not able to short the country. We will pick up this conversation another time. Chibamba Kanyama, thank you so much as always for joining me on Business Edge.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to wrap things up very quickly with NC4 to watch, and we start in Rwanda where the government, I beg your pardon, has announced plans to increase its 2021-2022 budget by $220.8 million from the initial $3.2 billion, hitting $3.4 billion. And we move on from there to Safaricom. Now, Safaricom investors in East Africa are in for a reward, while shareholders of Safaricom will be issued a notice on their interim dividend for the year that ended 31st of March 2020. United Nigeria Airlines has been granted an air operator certificate by the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority, and this certificate is the approval granted by the National Aviation Authority to an aircraft operator to allow it to use aircraft for commercial purposes. And finally, the economic damage wrought by the coronavirus will probably make many African countries to seek some form of debt restructuring, according to the head of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And that's it on this edition of Business Edge. Don't forget, we are on social media. Follow us at News Central TV. Go to our website, look for us on YouTube, and of course, download our mobile app. But most importantly, watch us live on StarTimes Channel 274. Until next time, I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun.